Israeli troops in Gaza reportedly approached the port and captured urban areas near Beit Hanun. There has also been fierce fighting reported around, but not on, the grounds of the Hamas stronghold under Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Israeli troops advanced in northern, central, and coastal areas of Gaza. The urban areas near Beit Hanun were captured. The Harel Brigade has been operating in the El Karam area between Beit Hanun and Jabalia in recent days. During the operations, the soldiers eliminated enemy forces and terrorist infrastructure, including long-range rocket launchers aimed at Israel, anti-tank missile launchers, terrorist tunnel shafts, and Hamas observation posts. The Shin Bet says that 20 Hamas terrorists were arrested deep inside Gaza and are being held for questioning. There is also fierce fighting around, but not on the grounds of Shifa Hospital, the Hamas stronghold, as Israel is careful to ensure that civilians and patients are unharmed in the battles. Israel and the U.S. are on the same page as far as Shifa Hospital is concerned.
And we do not want to see a firefight in a hospital where innocent people, helpless people, people seeking medical care are caught in the crossfire.
Meanwhile, the IDF is also reporting a sharp decline in the Hamas ability to fire rockets into Israel at a sustained pace. Hamas has been able to maintain sporadic rocket fire from Gaza at southern border towns. No injuries have been reported in the past day. A few Sderot residents came home for the first time since the war started on October 7th, some on a brief visit, and others hope to make it permanent.
אני פה לכמה שעות ואני יוצאת מפה. אי אפשר לחזור כרגע.
מתי חזרנו? בערך שבוע שעבר, כששמענו שטיפה נרגע, כאילו כן, עדיין יש אזעקות, עדיין יש בומים, אבל אנחנו כבר רגילים, כל כך התרגלנו לאזעקות ולצבע האדומים, שאנחנו כבר, זה לא מפחיד אותנו כמו שמפחיד העובדה שיש מחבלים שמסתובבים ורוצים במוות שלך רק בגלל שאתה יהודי.
Amid the controversy surrounding hospitals in Gaza, the IDF yesterday attempted to assist Palestinians in need. Once again, while the world condemns Israel, it's the IDF trying to help. ILTV's Devil Klein has the latest.
For weeks now, hospitals in Gaza have been claiming that they were running low on fuel and unable to keep the hospitals going. At the Al-Shifa hospital, where Hamas holds a command and control center, the IDF has made continuous efforts to ensure the evacuation and safety of civilian populations, as well as the access to necessary resources. IDF efforts continue despite the fact that Hamas has repeatedly taken resources from the hospital to use for their own sinister purposes. Yesterday, the IDF transferred 300 liters of fuel to the Al-Shifa hospital, only to find out that Hamas had intercepted the fuel and that the Gazans never got it. The IDF released footage of the delivery of the fuel and also phone calls coordinating the delivery with Gaza health officials.
احنا سنحط الوقود هاي في مفرق المجلس التشريعي، هاي مفرق تاع الشوارع عمر المختار وشارع الناصر.
مع النصر تمام.
راح يحكي معك، راح يقول لك لما حطينا الجالونات هذول وهم موجودين.
After the delivery, Hamas claimed that it wasn't true, but the evidence released by the IDF clearly shows otherwise.
The escalation continues in the north, and the exchange of blows took a heavy toll in Israel, with 21 wounded and 1 killed in Hezbollah missile and mortar attacks. The IDF struck back, taking out Hezbollah cells and targets. Meanwhile, further north, at least 6 pro-Iran fighters were killed in U.S. strikes in Syria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
In recent days, the spiraling cross-border provocations from Hezbollah have prompted dire warnings from Israel that the IDF responses had been limited until now, but that could change at any moment and would be felt in Beirut. In the latest Hezbollah provocation, 14 civilians from the electric company were wounded by an anti-tank guided missile attack. 1 later died of his wounds. 7 soldiers were wounded by a mortar near the northern community of Menara. The IDF responded by striking Hezbollah cells behind the attack against the civilians and hit several Hezbollah sites inside southern Lebanon, including a weapons depot. 2 cells that launched mortar attacks from Lebanon were also struck. At least 80 Hezbollah fighters have been killed by IDF strikes in the past month. There have also been signs from Israeli political and military leaders that the localized cross-border exchanges with Hezbollah could expand into full warfare at any moment. Meanwhile, U.S. military action in the region has stepped up. It's been confirmed that at least 6 pro-Iranian fighters from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were killed in U.S. airstrikes in Syria. The raids came after the U.S. said it would respond to attacks on American forces. Earlier, it was announced that 5 U.S. Special Operations troops were killed when their helicopter crashed into the Mediterranean Sea during a training mission.
The IDF announced the identities of 2 more soldiers killed fighting in the northern Gaza Strip. The death toll has now reached 44. They are Major Issachar Natan, 28, from Kiryat Malachi, and Staff Sergeant Itai Shoam, 21 years old, from Rosh Ain. Both were members of the Commando Brigade. May their memories be blessed. On October 7th, 9-year-old Ohad Mund was kidnapped from his grandparents' home in Nir Oz. For over a month, Ohad, who lived in Kfar Saba, has been held captive in Gaza, along with over 230 other hostages. There, he celebrated his 9th birthday on October 22nd, alone, in a situation no child should ever have to experience. In the weeks leading up to the kidnapping, Ohad even shared an invitation to his birthday party, a party that he would never be able to attend. His parents shared that Ohad is known for his chess skills and his love of soccer and tennis. Bring them home. Well, as anti-Israel protests continue throughout the world, we've seen alarming events taking place against Jewish people on nearly every continent. Last week, Canada saw a wave of anti-Jewish attacks on campuses. Here to speak with us is the former director of Canadian campuses for a leading pro-Israel organization and Jerusalem Post journalist, Zena Ramova. Zena, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's cut right to the chase. What's happening on campus in Canada?
So first off, thank you so much for having me, Emily. And what's happening not just in Canada, but as you said, almost in every continent, is we're seeing that what's happening across the world in Israel, Jewish people and Jewish students particularly are dealing with the ramifications of it. You mentioned Concordia University, and for anyone that didn't see that really shocking and scary video of a bunch of students that were trying to host a campaign for the 240 hostages held captive by Hamas in Gaza. And a mob of Hamas supporters stormed in, started chanting, harassing the students, at one point grabbed the flag and got very aggressive and violent. We also saw that video of the same campus at Concordia where a student was yelling and shouting and used a derogatory slur towards Jewish students. She's now saying that she never said it and she meant a different word, even though there's video evidence of her saying that word. The following day, McGill, which is just a 2-minute drive away from Concordia, hosted a rally as well. And the flyers for that rally actually had photos of broken glass. And it was right around the time of Kristallnacht. So It's very scary what's going on. And, as shocking as it is, my previous experiences working with those campuses specifically, I'm not surprised at all.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you yourself were a student on a Canadian campus. You dealt with these kinds of scenes even years ago. So how was your experience different than what we're seeing now, or was it?
It was more or less the same. That's why I wasn't surprised. At one point on the campus that I went to, York University in Toronto, Jewish students had to barricade themselves and lock themselves in. We just saw that recently with the photo circulating, I believe it was from a New York campus, where the students also had to barricade themselves. We couldn't walk around campus at York University without some sort of anti-Israel sentiment going on. We couldn't have a cultural event without the Israeli flag being defaced overnight. With Concordia and McGill, again, specifically, I ran a program there with some of the students that were my interns. At McGill, we hosted a beautiful mural that was about peace and coexistence. Students were able to come in and write positive messages. Within an hour, a mob of anti-Israel students had texted each other. I watched them text each other, and they came to block our mural and held signs with very toxic messages. So what was supposed to be a positive experience, a positive campus program that was supposed to talk about peace and coexistence, turned into a hate fest. Hours of a hate fest. They stood in front of our mural for hours. The following day at Concordia, when we were doing another program, someone ripped our Israeli flag from the table, ran out, and my student and I had to chase her. In the Montreal winter, we had to chase her, and she trashed our flag. We had to call the police, and it's nuts what's going on.
This was years ago.
This was years ago.
So what has been done since then? I mean, where is the administration? Where is the government, if relevant here in this discussion?
Well, I want to take it a step further, a little bit just outside of campus. And again, we're talking about Montreal specifically, but this is happening everywhere. Last week, a rally was hosted in Montreal with an imam who chanted a prayer that called for the destruction of all Zionists. What happened afterwards? A bunch of Jewish facilities were, there were firebomb issues there. And then a bunch of Jewish schools, 2 Jewish schools, I believe it was in Montreal, overnight, they found bullet holes at those schools. And so again, we're seeing this vile anti-Semitism happening because of what's happening in Israel. What's being done exactly? Well, I know there, organizations, the local federations and advocacy groups like CIJA, they're working with the police at the highest level to ensure the safety of students and trying to, get people to actually condemn what was going on. But the reality is, and this is for everywhere, both in the U.S. and Canada, that it's a Band-Aid to just add more security to Jewish institutions. There needs to be a zero tolerance policy when it comes to hate. You cannot use the K word against a Jewish student and get away with it. You cannot call for the destruction as an imam in a public area, call for the destruction of an entire group of people and not face the consequences. The consequences need to be there before Jews have to deal with the violence.
Well, Zena, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing these insights about the grim situation on Canadian campuses, but we'll hope for the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
While the war in Gaza rages on, protests continue throughout the world against Israel's right to defend itself. In London, on their Memorial Day for fallen soldiers, the anti-Israel crowds gathered again in the thousands in a move alienating the UK at even the highest levels. ILTV's Devo Klein has the full report.
Hundreds of thousands of anti-Israel activists gathered in central London on the UK's Armistice Day to protest against Israel and call for the destruction of the Jewish state. The protest, which was widely perceived as disrespectful to the UK's veterans, was condemned by even the UK Prime Minister. Footage from the scene featured blatant anti-Semitic chants for Intifada and pro-terror statements. Attendees were also pictured wearing Hamas bandanas.
Hamas they're classed as a proscribed terrorist organization. Do you think the UK has made the wrong decision?
Of course. It's not Hamas the terrorist. It's America the terrorist. No, and Israel is terrorist, not Hamas.
I think Hamas are freedom fighters. They are freedom fighters.
Pro-Hamas protesters were also pictured shouting, "Death to all Jews."
Death to all the Jews!
One attendee, an Iranian activist who held a sign calling Hamas ISIS and condemned the protesters, was attacked by pro-Palestinian demonstrators. Police are currently searching for the perpetrators. In response to the protest, counter-protesters also showed up, leading to 126 arrests. The London protests come as rallies are taking place globally against Israel, all of which have had anti-Semitic elements so far.
Well, we spoke about the dangerous situation for the Jewish community and Jewish students in Canada, but unfortunately, it's not just Canada where Jewish students are facing hate. Here to speak with us about the situation on campuses in the U.S. and globally, as well as the response, is Reichman University's Jonathan Davis. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us today.
And thanks for having me.
Of course. So I wanted to start off with, we're seeing some shocking scenes from campuses in response to this war in Gaza. What are you hearing from students?
Well, what I'm hearing from students is unpleasant feelings on their part. In various countries in Europe, in South Africa, in North America, unpleasant feelings. I mean, I used to feel sometimes anti-Semitism from certain professors from the Ivy League university in which I studied at the time, but now it seems to be flaming a lot more.
And you mentioned Ivy League universities. We've seen some pretty shocking scenes from faculty and administrations in some cases in response to this operation as well. What have you seen and what has been the response of university administrations in dealing with this problem?
Well, first of all, Reichman University, which teaches in English and has students from 90 different countries, 30% of our student body actually studies in English. Our professors, many of our professors, come from those same Ivy League universities. Many of our professors come from Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, from Stanford, from other places. And they're shocked and they're horrified, be they left, center, or right, in their political feelings. They are shocked, horrified, and disappointed at the administration of those universities and how it handled the problem over there. And the Jewish students felt like orphans in many cases. The Jewish students felt very insecure, and the Jewish students felt helpless in many cases because people who support Hamas or people who were supporting the destruction of the state of Israel from the river to the sea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those Jewish students felt not only academically and intellectually disappointed, but also physically, sometimes physically taunted by these individuals. But sometimes these challenges and problems can also lead to opportunities.
I was going to ask you, my next question for you was, what do you think can be done from both the perspective of the faculty there and the students?
First of all, I don't believe in fear tactics. So I would never say to a student at some university, come to Israel to study because you might get beaten up by someone. So I don't believe in fear tactics, but what I do believe is that I think some of the administrations of some of these universities should be punished by their donors and by their supporters. I think it's fair. I mean, you can't necessarily support an academic chair somewhere, and the next day, that same professor is going to be raving anti-Semitic curses or voting for the destruction of the state of Israel if you're the guy that gave the funds for that. It could be quite disappointing for the donor, to say the least. So that's one thing which is already taking place. I saw a list of 130 top donors of universities in the States who have pulled out. And so they've got leverage in having an impact. Countries like Qatar, which have plowed something like $2.5 billion over the years into top American universities, they've bought their way through. So Qatar, which is Hamas terrorist supporting country, basically donates hundreds of millions of dollars to certain Ivy League universities, and all of a sudden they have some of the top academic chairs in which they can profess what they would like to profess.
Right.
Okay? Academic freedom, academic truth, Qatar style.
Right.
Okay? Which is interesting. You have a combination of a terrorist state, and on the other hand, that some of these universities overt liberalism. But the twain shall meet when it comes to financial support. But for the students at these universities, I strongly recommend to look at the option of studying at my university, Reichman University. And why do I say that? A, we teach in English. B, there's no anti-Semitism. C, if you put up a poster for our hostages, nobody is going to rip it down. Okay? You won't have an altercation about that. Come to a university which has a shloshim, okay, for the fallen soldiers of that university. Come to a university where you can wear Magen David overtly and not feel badly about it. And come to Israel, where there is very little crime, and which is pretty safe, actually. All things being said, my grandchildren are still walking the streets of Ra'anana and having a good time.
I wanted to add about Reichman University that there's also a lot of non-Jewish population as well. It's actually a very diverse student body.
It's a very diverse group of people. We have a lot of Africans who have come to study, especially sustainability and other subjects which they want to bring back to Africa. We've got many non-Jewish people from the East, people from China and South Korea and Singapore and other countries, from India, and so on and so forth. So it's a university which respects the rights of all of the other people, be they Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhists, Jains, whatever they happen to be, and tolerant of everyone. So if you feel like being who you want to be at Reichman University, I call it humanistic, pluralistic Zionism.
Amen. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan.
My absolute pleasure.
Well, while anti-Israel protests continue, the Jewish community and allies are holding their own. In major cities in France, some 180,000 people from across the political spectrum attended rallies against spiraling anti-Semitism in the nation, with the largest Jewish population in Europe. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
The slogan adopted at rallies across France against raising anti-Semitism was "For the Republic Against Anti-Semitism," attended by some 180,000 people nationwide. The rallies followed 1,250 reported anti-Jewish incidents in France since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. Some 105,000 attended the rally in Paris. Thousands more gathered at more than 70 events across the country, including in major cities, Lyon, Nice, and Strasbourg.
Aujourd'hui, on voit de plus en plus d'actes antisémites et c'est important pour nous de témoigner de ça et de montrer qu'on est là, que c'est vraiment une cause et une valeur que la République doit soutenir de manière forte et que c'est inadmissible aujourd'hui de voir tout ce qui se passe en France, que le conflit soit importé de manière inacceptable. Et que les Juifs de France, notamment, soient hyper impactés par ce qui se passe au Proche-Orient.
President Macron did not attend the rally in person, but said that he was there in spirit, condemning what he called unbearable resurgence of raging anti-Semitism in the country. At the same time, he also called the Israeli President Herzog to clarify comments he made in the recent BBC interview, criticizing the way Israel was conducting the war in Gaza. He added, he does not accuse Israel of striking civilians intentionally, that he supports Israel's right to defend itself and support Israel in the war against Hamas. Top French Senate leaders jointly sponsored the event that was attended by French Prime Minister Braun and former Presidents Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy. Family members of some of the 40 French citizens killed in the initial Hamas onslaught and those missing or held hostage also took part in the march. Far-right leader Le Pen joined the march, and so did the left-wing parties and right organizations, but made sure to be separate from the far right at the same rally. Only the hard-left French Unbowed party boycotted the event.
Tant mieux qu'il soit là. On n'est pas là pour faire de la politique, on est là pour une manifestation pour la bonne cause et pour l'antisémitisme. On n'est pas là pour faire de la politique.
Tensions have been rising in France's capital, home to large Jewish and Muslim communities. More than 3,000 police and gendarmes were deployed to maintain security. Around 500,000 Jewish people live in France, making it up to Europe's largest community. The march took place a day after several thousand people took part in anti-Israel protests in Paris, demanding an immediate ceasefire.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight throughout the country, with lows of around 18 degrees Celsius or 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, cloudy skies and temperatures reaching highs of only 23 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit, with thunderstorms expected in the north. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, iltv.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the state of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.